They didn't shout. They didn't argue. They said it like it was a household rule, firm, final, already decided. "Leave," my father said, "and don't come back." It was Christmas dinner. My 7-year-old was sitting beside me, swinging her legs under the table, napkin folded carefully in her lap, because she'd been told to act grown up tonight. She froze. So did I. My name is Hannah Cole. I was 37, a case administrator, recently separated, and still naive enough to believe that Christmas meant temporary truces, even in families where love was conditional. Dinner had barely started. The table was full, candles lit, plates passed around. My daughter had whispered, "This smells good," and smiled up at my mother. That smile disappeared when the room went quiet. "I'm not doing this again," my mother said, pushing her chair back. "You bring chaos everywhere you go." I blinked. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what," my father replied. "We're done." "With me?" I asked. "With both of you," he said flatly, glancing at my daughter like she was part of the problem. My daughter's hand slid into mine. "But we just got here," she said softly. No one answered her. "Take her," my mother said, "and go." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. I looked around the table, at people I'd grown up with, people who had watched my daughter learn to walk, who had bought her Christmas presents, wrapped and waiting in the other room. No one spoke, no one objected. That silence was louder than anything they could have said. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. "Okay," I said, not because I agreed, but because in that moment there was only one thing that mattered. My daughter was looking at me, not scared yet, just confused, waiting to see what I would do when the adults decided she didn't belong. And I already knew this wouldn't end at the front door. Because words like leave and never return don't disappear once they're said. They change everything that comes after. We didn't rush. That surprised me afterward, how steady my body felt even though my chest was tight enough to hurt. I picked up my coat first, then my daughter's. I helped her slide her arms into the sleeves, buttoned the top button the way she liked, slow and deliberate. No one stopped us. No one said, "Wait." The sound of cutlery against plates resumed behind us, awkward and uneven, like the room was trying to pretend nothing had just happened. At the door, my daughter looked back once. "Are we still having Christmas?" she asked. "Yes," I said immediately. "Just not here." She nodded, accepting that answer because she trusted me, not because it made sense yet. That trust burned into me. Outside, the cold air hit hard, the kind that steals your breath for a second before you remember how to breathe again. I buckled her into the car, my hands shaking just enough that I had to redo one strap. She watched me carefully, her eyes searching my face for cues. "Am I in trouble?" she asked. "No," I said firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong." She relaxed a little at that, leaned back in her seat. The engine started. The house behind us stayed lit, warm, loud. We pulled away anyway. My phone buzzed before we'd even reached the end of the street. A message from my mother. "You didn't have to make a scene." I stared at the screen, stunned by the audacity. Then another message came through. "This is exactly why we said what we said." I turned the phone face down, because whatever justification they were rehearsing wasn't going to land with me anymore. At home, I made grilled cheese and cut it into triangles like I always did when she was upset. She ate quietly, methodically, like she was trying to reassert some control over the night. Afterward, she asked if we could open one present. "Of course," I said. She chose a small one she'd picked out herself weeks ago. Something simple, something safe. When she smiled, it wasn't wide, but it was real. That night, as I tucked her into bed, she asked the question I'd been dreading. "Are they mad at me?" I sat on the edge of the mattress and brushed her hair back gently. No, I said. They made a bad choice, and my job is to make sure you don't pay for it. She considered that. Okay, she said, and then, because she was 7 and exhausted, and still trusting the world more than it deserved, she rolled over and went to sleep. I stayed there longer than usual, watching her breathe, because I knew something fundamental had shifted. They thought they'd ended the night by sending us away. What they didn't realize was that they'd just ended their authority over what came next. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was replaying the argument, but because I was replaying the looks, the way my daughter's shoulders had stiffened, the way she'd gone quiet instead of crying, the way she'd trusted me to know what to do next. By morning, the shock had settled into something clearer. Resolve. The messages started early, from my mother first. We didn't mean it like that. Then my father. You overreacted. It was an emotional moment. I read them both twice. Neither asked how my daughter was doing, neither said they were wrong. That told me this wasn't about repair. It was about regaining control. I didn't reply. I made practical changes instead. I updated emergency contacts at school, removed names, added backups. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't announce it. I corrected the situation the same way I would fix any other risk, quietly, thoroughly, without asking permission. A few days later, my sister called. So, are you really not bringing her around anymore? She asked, like this was an inconvenience she needed clarity on. No, I said. She scoffed. You're holding a grudge over one sentence. One sentence told me everything I needed to know, I replied. Silence. She'll forget, my sister said finally. I tightened my grip on the phone. I won't let her be tested again just to prove you wrong. That ended the call. My daughter adjusted faster than I expected, not because she didn't care, but because children respond to consistency. Once she realized we weren't going back, the questions stopped circling. One afternoon, she asked, "Are we allowed to leave places when people are mean?" "Yes," I said immediately. "Even if they're family?" "Especially then." She nodded, satisfied. And just like that, the lesson they'd tried to teach her lost its power. The invitations slowed, then stopped. Holidays passed quietly. Birthdays, too. I didn't feel guilty. I felt steadier every week, because distance stopped feeling like loss and started feeling like safety. They said leave and never return like it was a punishment. What they didn't understand was that they weren't casting us out. They were showing me exactly where we didn't belong. And once I saw that clearly, I stopped trying to earn a seat at a table that would always see my child as expendable. The apology never came. There were messages later, careful, indirect, shaped to sound reasonable without ever admitting fault. My parents suggested we let it go. Someone said it was said in the heat of the moment. But no one asked how my daughter slept that night. No one asked if she was okay. And that absence said more than any apology ever could. In the weeks that followed, life became quieter. Not empty, just simpler. There were no tense visits to prepare for, no explanations to rehearse, no anxiety about whether love would be withdrawn if someone felt inconvenienced. My daughter settled into that calm faster than I did. One afternoon, while we were drawing together at the kitchen table, she said, "I like our house better." "Why?" I asked. "Because nobody tells us to leave." That was it. That was the sentence that closed the door for me. We made our own version of Christmas after that. Pancakes for dinner, movies we'd already seen, lights that stayed on late because no one was counting minutes or measuring behavior. It wasn't perfect, but it was warm, and it was ours. I used to believe that family meant endurance, that you stayed no matter what was said, because leaving was worse. I don't believe that anymore. Now I believe family is defined by who protects you when it matters, not who claims you when it's convenient. My parents told my 7-year-old and me to leave and never return. They meant it as a punishment. What they didn't understand was that they were offering clarity. They were showing me the cost of staying and the safety of walking away. I took my daughter's hand and chose the place where she would never have to wonder if she was wanted. And because of that choice, she learned something that night that will stay with her far longer than the dinner we never finished. That when someone tells you to leave, you're allowed to go. And you're allowed to build a life where you never have to come back.